to our Bundestag, which is our damn it, what's the word? Parliament. We also have two bigger parties that are like more centered. One is more, conservative, and the other one is more social.
I don't know if I go more into this, I'm gonna skip past that because if you want like a roundup of German politics and the currently active important parties, I made a stream about that last year. I'm gonna link it on the video version of this. My first point still stands. America has a huge problem democracy wise, just because a democracy between two parties is a democracy, but it's really not that. Like, representing interests really becomes a problem, and you can see it from the fact that more and more so today, after Trump and after all the other bullshit, you basically have one party that is, and careful opinion, but this is what it is. One side of the spectrum that's trying to lead the country into fascism, and one side of the spectrum that basically has to catch everyone who doesn't want fascism, which makes things tricky when you're trying to agree on stuff. So that's why it's good to have more than two parties, which is luckily still the case in Germany, even though, of course, we have majority parties.
By now, to me, they're pretty much the same, but let's not get into that. I lived in America, and if I were to vote, I really wouldn't be, what for? I would go, but I...
Just so I'm not misunderstood, by that I did not mean I wouldn't go vote. I think I just said that there as well, but like, it wouldn't feel like I'm choosing much. Basically, at this point, it's really just choosing between doom and, well, I guess it's better than doom.
I don't think I would feel like I really had a choice. Another thing about the politics issue is that the propaganda you see in America really just makes me sick. It's not about telling people what you want to do, what you want to change, what you want to do for the people, what you think, blah, 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 really.
And by propaganda, I think I meant, it's not like it's not like I don't think that way about what you could call propaganda or what should be considered propaganda, but I think I was talking about stuff like campaign ads, what here you would call Wahlkampf, election fights, which I think in the US you generally call campaigning. So the way that campaigns work in the US made me sick in 2013, and still true today. Would say even more so.
Presenting points, of course they do that somehow, but it's always mainly about the other guy's dick. Vote for me. And I feel like if people started doing that here, they would be sure to lose, because if we like one thing here, it's rationality. That can be very icky, and it can be very annoying at times, because it always feels like everything's very regulated. We have a lot of rules here, we have a lot of regulations, and people like to stay with those, and stay within the rules and make sure they're following the rules. Nothing can happen to you if you follow the rules, right? Politics and getting informed about politics and propaganda, the unwritten rules of that are that you have a certain content that you present and that people want to know about, and even if they're bullshitting us, even if they never do what they announce, at least they're telling us that they're going to do this and going to do that. It doesn't feel like a pissing contest, and I feel like that is what American politics often turn into very quickly. I feel like if one side or one party or whatever starts
I'm going to comment on this in a minute,
and people go for it, at least to a certain extent, that quickly becomes the norm, and that just, I don't like that. I find that very yucky and dangerous to a certain extent.
all of that is still true, and I think I was kind of struggling to find the words for some stuff, and I was also kind of worried to be too divisive, which I'm by now I would like to find a lot of much clearer words, and then sometimes I remember that I do in fact not have a social commentary channel, so I try to reel it in. But these glasses are annoying me. It's really different, isn't it? Exactly, Christine. This was in 2013. Oh, how things just got worse and worse in the following few years. Exactly. And it did in Germany as well. So I remember 2012 being in the US. I took a trip for about 2 months, bit less. Went to a bunch of different cities. So this was after that. And I remember that was the Obama versus Mitt Romney. Was that it? I think it was Mitt Romney. And I was in New Orleans when the presidential debates happened. Yes, thank you, exactly. Okay. And I remember playing a drinking game to what is he going to mention? What is he going to mention? You know, it was all very like, ha ha ha, this is not that serious. And even then, as evidenced by this video, I was really annoyed and taken aback by how that all worked, because all the campaign ads I ever, came in contact with, just through like being online and stuff, and generally being relatively well informed on American politics, for better or for worse, always seemed like just like, he sucks. Okay, but what do you want to do? By now, I feel like actually, especially like, and to be clear, this has always been much more of a Republican thing than a Democratic thing. I think here I was trying to be like, egalitarian about it, and it's not like the Democrats are, perfect about this, but there's a huge, definite difference. Just want to be clear about that. I wasn't clear about that in this video, for, like I said, didn't want to be too divisive. But the gap has gotten bigger, for one, and now when there is a semblance of like, I'm going to talk about my content from the campaign ads I've seen from the Republican side, and in the recent times, it's fascio fantasy land. So yeah, it's really gotten worse. It's gotten more of this. It's gotten more caricature of this. It's gotten more mask off in its actual intentions, and most recently these past 2 years. And unfortunately, it's moved further towards that in Germany as well. I would say that started, it started before, but it became a thing, noticeably so, around the time of the migrant crisis in 2015/2016, when when a lot of things happened and whatever. That's obviously very complicated stuff. Exactly, like the Alternative für Deutschland. Again, if you have no idea about German politics, but you want to find out, I recommend you watch the stream I did with Dan Arrows last year, where we basically did an overview of all the parties that are relevant, a bit of the history, and the context. But yeah, basically, the Alternative für Deutschland had been around for a few years at that point, but their agenda, their contents, whatever up to that point, had basically just been anti-Europe, which doesn't mean that at that point they weren't reactionary. They were founded as a reactionary party as a response to the euro crashing in several countries, most of all Greece and Germany, among others, but Germany in large parts bailing them out, which, still needs to be mentioned. It's not like Germany didn't profit from that. Long and short of it is, a reactionary party that started out being anti-Europe, like anti-EU, then used the opportunity of the migrant crisis in 2015/2016 to become a full-on right-wing party in suits. And they have gained serious ground since then, because of several things, some of which really aren't that dissimilar to what happened in the US, where a huge part of Trump's voter bases are people who used to be, unchangeably core Democrat voters for decades, and then unfortunately got felt left behind, in some ways rightfully so, in some ways through basically misunderstandings of how things work, and being caught by tactics of stupid reactionary propaganda, and getting turned basically against their own interests. So a lot of that has happened in Germany as well. It's not anywhere near the point where it is in the US at the moment. Part of that is because we're not as much in late stage capitalism as the US is, but we're not that far off. So unfortunately, since I recorded this video to get back to the topic at hand, things have changed and have, since I already, pointed out in this video that I consider this a bad thing, German politics has moved into the direction of how politics are conducted in the US in some ways, and therefore, in my opinion, gotten worse. So not everything I'm saying here is true anymore. I would even say that from today's perspective, I'd say that it wasn't necessarily all true back then either. It's not like nobody ran on like cult of personality stuff back then either. The CDU, which was or is the Merkel's party, at that point already, although not that like staunchly, ran mostly based on Merkel's image and less so based on their actual politics, which were generally not exactly neutrally put progressive. But yeah, so Sydney, is nationalism rising in Central Europe as well? Absolutely. Absolutely. And it has been for a few years, and this isn't only happening in Germany. You have, well, right now it's kind of coming to a boiling point. You had a right-wing party being very prominent in Denmark, which at this point is, I think, also coming on to 10 years. I don't know where they're at right now, if that's like curved down a bit more. In Sweden, there was something at some point. In France, you have the constant annoyance of the Front National, which is Le Pen's party, which is absolutely, undeniably a Nazi party. And then now we have the new fascio movement in Italy by a party that was founded by freaking Mussolini supporters, or even by himself, and has been around since then. Eastern Europe has a certain problem with fascism, and do I need to mention the whole Russia-Ukraine whatever? Obviously I can't speak competently on all, if any, of those things, but I can definitely say that Germany, while we don't have a new fascism problem in the way of like, we're about to go back to Hitler times, we're very, very far from that. We do have an issue with reactionaries that we didn't have at that point, right? The AfD, like I said, had just been founded, or actually when I made this video, it hadn't been founded, or maybe it just had been. It was either not around, but about to be, or just founded. And unfortunately, they became more relevant at some point during those almost 10 years, and have been until today. Although recently they've been dropping off, because you can't run on the same bullshit forever if you don't actually have any content to back it up. And I would say that that is a difference, fortunately, still, where undoubtedly the AfD has way too much support for what they are, but it's not anywhere near the power that the Republican Party has in the US. And I have hope, reasonable hope, that they're never going to get there. So there definitely still is a very, very big difference there. We do not have a party that is one of two establishment parties that is actively pursuing fascistic circumstances. I'm going to put another disclaimer at the end to this. Of course, this is all my opinion. I feel kind of annoyed to make that disclaimer, but, you know, take it or leave it. I do feel like a lot of this is very much based in fact, but that usually doesn't help with people who are going to disagree with me on this strongly. Who cares about US politics? US and UK politics are an utter joke nowadays. Well, yeah, let's not even talk about the UK, because that's its own mess. Well, what I always say is when people are like, why do you worry about US politics? You're in Germany. What happens in the US affects the whole world. I wish it didn't. Although by now, at this point, we live in a society where most of what happens in any country is going to have an international consequence, effect, influence in some way or another. But for some countries, that's more true than for others. And for the US, it's more true, basically, than for any other country. And so it's a joke. It's a fucking joke. But unfortunately, it's not funny. So that's why I think it's important to think about this stuff. You know, I don't really care that much anymore. So if there's this much to say about it, then maybe it just needs to be that long.